I never thought a single summer could change the way I saw love, loss, and silence itself. Back then, I was 24, living in a small coastal town in Oregon called Harborview, the kind of place where mornings smelled like sea salt and burnt coffee, and everyone knew who you used to be in high school. I worked at a local bookstore, Harbor Pages, a cozy, slightly falling apart place owned by a retired English teacher named Marianne. I loved the stillness of it, the smell of paper and dust, and the sound of rain tapping on the windows. I wasn't living a dream, exactly, but I was living something quiet, something that didn't hurt, until he walked in. It was early June. The air was thick with warmth, and the sea fog had rolled in from the west. I was stacking books when the bell above the door rang, and a man stepped inside. He wasn't from here. I could tell right away. He had that city restlessness about him. His jeans were torn at the knees, his hair messy in that way that looks accidental but probably isn't, and a camera hung from his neck like it was part of him. He looked around for a moment, then smiled, the kind of slow, half smile that hits you before you know what to do with it. "Hi," he said, walking up to the counter. "Do you happen to have any maps of the area? Or books about the coast?" His voice was calm but curious. "Maps are in the back. Travel section," I said, pointing. "You're not from Harborview, are you?" He grinned. "That obvious?" "Pretty much."
He nodded, amused.
"I'm Eli Bennett," he said, holding out his hand. "Lena Carter," I replied. When our hands touched, something quiet happened. Not fireworks, not sparks, just a kind of stillness, like the air held its breath. He ended up staying for an hour, flipping through books and asking questions about the cliffs, the lighthouse, the best view of the bay. Before he left, he bought a small journal and a used copy of On the Road. "I'm doing a photo series," he told me, "about forgotten towns. The places people drive past without stopping." "Well," I said, "you found the right one." He laughed, thanked me, and left. But for the rest of that day, every time the bell above the door rang, I hoped it would be him again. He came back the next day. And the day after. Sometimes he'd buy a book, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes he'd just talk about photography, about the road, about how he'd been driving west for months without really knowing what he was looking for. That I told him about my life, how I'd gone to college in Portland, fallen in love once, and come home when things fell apart. He didn't pry. He just listened. By mid-July, Eli had become part of my days. He'd show up with coffee, sit on the counter, and tell me stories about the people he'd met on the road. He started taking photos around town of the harbor, the children on their bikes, the way the light hit the old movie theater sign. Sometimes he'd photograph me, though I'd pretend not to notice. One evening, he asked, "Do you ever feel like you stayed somewhere too long?" I looked up from my cup of tea. "Every day." He smiled faintly.
"Yeah."
"Me too." That night, after closing, he walked me home. The streets were quiet, the smell of salt in the air. When we reached my door, he said softly, "You know, I didn't expect to like it here this much." "Maybe it's not the town," I said. He looked at me, really looked, and I realized I'd just said something I couldn't take back. By August, we were inseparable. We'd watch sunsets from the cliffs, drive out to the lighthouse at midnight, share fries in silence, and laugh at nothing. He'd show me his photos, raw, honest moments of strangers and skies, and I'd tell him how words could do the same thing if you used them right. We didn't call it love, not yet. It was something quieter, something deeper. But I could feel it growing in the spaces between our words. One morning, as he was taking pictures of the waves, he said, "You know, I might stay a while." "How long's a while?" I asked. He smiled. "Until it feels like time to go." I didn't realize then how close a while was to ending. That in late August, Eli started getting calls. Once he didn't answer in front of me. He grew quieter, distracted. Sometimes I'd find him sitting alone on the beach at dawn, staring at the water with his camera untouched beside him. When I asked what was wrong, he'd shake his head and say, "Nothing. Just thinking." But I knew it was something. One night, I followed him to the cliffs. He didn't see me. I watched him on the phone, voice low, saying words like hospital, treatment, too late. When he hung up, he stayed there for a long time, shoulders trembling. I wanted to go to him. But I didn't. Not that night, a few days later, I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He told me he had Hodgkin's lymphoma, that he'd gone into remission last year, thought it was gone. But it came back. And this time, it was spreading fast. He said he came to Harborview to finish his photo project, to capture beauty in the small, quiet things before he couldn't anymore. I remember sitting there, not knowing how to breathe. He reached for my hand. "I didn't mean to make you part of this," he said softly. "I didn't mean to make it harder." I cried then, not because he was dying, but because for the first time in years, I'd found something worth living for. We didn't talk about hospitals after that. We didn't talk about treatment or time. We just lived, that we drove until the gas light came on. We danced in empty parking lots. We made pancakes at 3 a.m. He took my picture on the pier, saying, "For when you forget how it felt to be loved." I didn't forget. I still haven't. As September came, he grew weaker. He stopped carrying his camera everywhere. Some days he'd just sit by the window of the bookstore, watching the rain. One evening, I found him there, asleep with his head on his arm, a half-finished letter beside him. It said, "Lena, if I could, I'd take a picture of the way you look when you read. That's what peace looks like to me." The last time I saw him was the first day of October. He'd been admitted to a hospital in Portland. I took the bus there, holding my breath the whole way. He was pale, thinner, but when he saw me, he smiled. "I was afraid you wouldn't come," he whispered. "I always come," I said, holding his hand. He handed me his camera. "There's one picture left on the roll," he said. "Take it."
So I did.
I leaned close, kissed his forehead, and pressed the shutter. The sound of the click echoed in the room like a heartbeat. That was the last time I saw him alive. A week later, he was gone. Mary and closed the bookstore for a day, just for me. I sat there, surrounded by the smell of paper and sea air, staring at his camera. I didn't know how to develop film, but his friend in Portland helped me. When the photos came back, I went through them one by one. The harbor, the cliffs, me, laughing with my hair in the wind. And then, the last one, that IT wasn't a picture of him, that IT wasn't me. Either IT was the space between us, blurry, imperfect, but full of light. He must have taken it the night before, when I wasn't looking. The caption he'd scrawled on the back said, "You were the stillness I'd been chasing." It's been 3 years. The bookstore is still there. The same bell, the same window, the same smell of dust and ocean. Sometimes tourists stop by and ask about the photos hanging on the back wall, his photos. I tell them the story. Not all of it, but enough. Every year on October 3rd, I walk to the cliffs, camera in hand. I take one picture, just like he taught me, not of the sea or the sky, but of the space between things. The quiet that holds everything together, because that's where he still lives.